step is minimizing the possible confounding variables. So first off, just what are confounding variables? So confounding variables are variables that we are not specifically studying. So it's not the response or explanatory variable. So variables that we are not specifically studying but which may cause patterns to appear which may influence the results of the study. So, for example, let's say that a company wishes to show that their new antibacterial soap is more effective than their old soap. Researchers will break their sample into two groups. Group A will wash with the old soap, and Group B will wash with the new soap. What are some confounding variables that might affect the amount of bacteria left on a person's hands after washing them? So in this case, Group A, washing with the old soap, is essentially supposed to be our control group. That's what we're trying to compare to. And Group B, washing with the new soap, will be our treatment group. So Group A is our control group. Group B is our treatment group. Then I ask, what are some confounding variables that might affect the amount of bacteria left on a person's hands after washing them? So some things that might influence how much bacteria is on their hands after washing them. So some confounding variables. The amount of bacteria before they wash their hands would influence how much is left at the end. So the amount of bacteria before washing hands something else that might influence the results, how long they wash their hands. The temperature of the water. How much soap they use. How they go about drying their hands. What they do when they're washing their hands, how well they scrub their hands. So these are all factors that might influence how much bacteria is left after a person washes their hands. So if, for example, we put a bunch of people in group A that wash their hands for 5 seconds and they're really lazy about how they wash their hands. And then in group B, we put a bunch of people who wash their hands for 20 seconds and they scrub really hard. Then, of course, the results will look different. It may not even matter what soap they're using if group B has the people that put more effort into washing their hands. So, what researchers can do is they can essentially add rules to their experiment to try to sort of counteract these confounding variables. So, for direct control, the researcher adds rules for the individuals to follow to try to counteract the confounding variables. So, for example, let's use the same example that we were using earlier. I'm going to list each of the confounding variables and then we'll put a rule that might counteract it. So let's put our confounding variables. On the left, and then on the right, we'll put the rule. So the first variable we had was the amount of bacteria on the hands before washing them. So what we might say, and this is an example that your textbook actually used, is we might say everyone handle raw chicken for 5 minutes before washing their hands. So the individual must handle raw chicken for 5 minutes before washing their hands. Then next up, the next confounding variable was how long they washed their hands. And the rule that they might apply is that they have to wash their hands for 20 seconds. And then next up, we had the temperature of the water. So the researchers may somehow set the temperature of the sink they're using to a very specific, so I have everyone use the same sink set to a specific temperature. And next up was how much soap they use. I apologize for all the scrolling. So they may use one squirt where the researcher is the one that squirts the soap. So one squirt administered by the researcher. Next up was how they dry their hands. So it could be that everyone air dries their hands or uses the electric air dryer. For, I don't know, 20 seconds. And then last up was uh, how well they scrub their hands. So this one's a little harder to control. Presumably, if the researcher is there watching, the researcher could tell scrub harder, or scrub faster. Um, but we could at least say that they should actively scrub for the whole time. So these are all rules that could easily be set. For the study, you could just have the researchers have the individuals do precisely these things and watch them the whole way through. And these somewhat then will control for these confounding variables that otherwise might influence the results. So this is an example of how we might use direct control to help make sure that we are showing that it is in fact this new soap that is the result of the improved uh, or the less bacteria left on the hand.